Hello, welcome to episode 2 of Ultrascape Podcast. My name is Josh Ibbett, and I'm joined once more by my co-host, Beccy Waters. Hi, Beccy, how are you?
Hi, Josh. I'm all right, thank you. Ready for summer, but might be a while for that.
Well, yeah, it's not going to happen now, is it? It's, end of January, nearly February, and I actually saw the sun today for the first time in a few days. But
That's
yeah, apart from
good.
that,
Gets you ready for your race next week.
Yeah, it's pretty grey here. So yeah, Morocco next week, which would be nice. It'll probably rain. It normally does when I go there. I'm the only person that can go to a race in the desert twice and it rained both times. So yeah, that is coming up on the show. So we are going to talk about the Atlas Mountain Race, which is next week. We're also going to talk about the race around Rwanda. The bikepacking season is kicking off, and those are the two kind of. Well, the Atlas is probably the biggest race of the early season, and Rwanda is ever popular. We'll cover some news, and we'll also talk about race volunteers in the races, because they're an essential part of making these things work. But before we go any further, I need to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Redshift. They produce bike components such as the shock stop seat post. So I've actually been getting my bike ready for Atlas Mountain Race this morning, and I've fitted my seat post. Ready for the race. So basically it just gives you about 30 millimeters of suspension on the seat post, and on a race like Atlas where it's really rough, it really does make a difference. It just means you can sit down and pedal over the bumps a little bit easier. Yeah, saving energy by not having to stand up or just hitting rocks really hard, and these little things add up in these races. So a big thank you to Redshift. We've got a bit of a discount code. Ultrascape is the code, so that gives you 15% off on their website, which I'll put in the comments and description below. So thank you to those guys. So Beccy, what's our news? What have we got? What's happened in January?
Really not very much, to be honest.
No.
Other than we're all preparing for another big season. I believe you're going to run us through the race that's happened over the weekend, which is pretty much the season opener, I guess.
It is, yeah. I mean, we're talking about some of the snow races here. So there's the Fat Viking, which it's a very small event in Norway. Snow biking is kind of a pretty unique, and there's only a few people that kind of really dedicate themselves to it because of that there's a lot of extra equipment you need and expertise, and it's quite hard to find. So it's always a small field. But Fat Viking, it's only 150k, but it was won by David Rieber. It was in 11 hours 49 minutes. And I think we'll touch a bit more on sort of winter ultras next month, as we've got the Iditarod Trail Invitational starting on the 23rd of February. So Leo Wilcox is riding that. So that's going to be something to touch on. And the other race that happened, well, is it a race, Beccy, or not? I don't know.
Well, good question. We probably shouldn't call it a race. The name is Grangoenche Audax Road, and they have 3 different terrains that happen at various times in the year, the other 2 being gravel and trail. And it is by definition an Audax, but there are some incentives to ride it quite quickly. Firstly being that some fast people turn up and they can't help themselves, and secondly being that if you make it within a certain time cut, you get your entry fee refunded, don't you?
Do you? I don't know. I've never done it. I've never made it, to be honest. So I have ridden the route. I mean, so the nice thing about this is Matteo who runs this event. It's a really cool event in the Canary Islands. So you cross 5 islands on the event, and essentially it's kind of the main race is a race against the ferry. So there's a set kind of ferry timetable which is given to you at the start, and the target is to hit Audax pace, which is kind of the fastest reasonable time to make the ferries and cover all the islands. And I think this year, the winner, well, the fastest rider was Kevin Buscardin, I think his name's pronounced, in 35 hours, 23 minutes. However, there was 4 riders that made it to, I think it's La Gomera is the final island on the road Audax. But 4 riders made that final ferry, and then essentially it's kind of like a 4-up race around that island. And I've ridden that route. I did some guiding on it last year, and basically you ride up a massive volcano and back down again. So it's whoever's freshest at the end. And so yeah, Kevin was fastest, and the first woman was Theresa Dorfmer in 54 hours 52 minutes. And I think there's still riders going now. So yeah, I think if you want to look at it, there's a tracker somewhere. But yes, it's known as a race against the ferries, and there's a couple more. The gravel one is it April or March?
Question.
As you can see, we've researched this very well again. So we'll talk about that at a later date. And again, yeah, it's a similar concept, but on gravel. So yeah, it's a cool little race, and it's a nice sort of season opener. If you're not into getting really cold in Norway and riding a fat bike, you can go to the Canaries and just get really tired riding up a volcano.
Along a similar latitude is Morocco, and we've picked out a couple of names of the riders who will be lining up at the Atlas Mountain next week with Josh, who are also intending on doing Nelson's other 2 races this year.
So yeah, we discussed this in episode 1, and you know what did we we didn't have much news last time in episode 1, so we did make quite a lot of stuff up, if I'm honest. And we decided that completing the 3 mountain races, soon to be 4, run by Nelson Trees, is going to be called the Full Nelson. And last year 2 people did all 3 races, so Jacob Hora and Martin van Heverbecker. I think that's how you say his name. Sorry, Martin, if I've destroyed that. But it's catching on, and more and more people are doing these races. So this year we have Megan Hakkinen. She's taking part. Maureen Golfman, Alex McCormack, and hopefully me. Hopefully I'll be completing all of them. So we'll touch more on those riders in a little while when we talk about the Atlas Mountain race and give that preview. But yeah, just thought I'd note that because it's pretty cool to see more and more riders committing to these things. And talking of more riders, there's some pretty cool news on the Transcontinental race. You may remember last episode we talked about the women's 100 kind of incentive for TCR. And Beccy, what's the outcome of that?
Well, in their attempt to get 100 women at the start line, which they'd only ever had 40 before, they've now got 112 entries for women for this year's TCR, which I thought was astonishing, Josh. I really thought 100 was bold and...
Yeah, well, I think they did too. I mean, we were both at the launch, and I think they were I think Hannah was saying, yeah, we know it's going to be a tall ask, but if you don't set the target, then it's never going to happen. And I think it's kind of, it's just like proof of, like, if you build it, they will come. And, you know, just giving, that space and opening that space up to women and just giving some encouragement, it just shows that it pays off. And
building of momentum can really work well. We've seen it at races like GP Giro and the Highland Trail, where women will often, they might be more inclined to go to a race when they know other women are already going. It evolves.
And now, like on the Highland Trail, it's almost 50-50 every single year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So I think it's going to, well, it's obviously really good for the sport, and it's good for women's cycling. And I think it sets a precedence. And out of those 112 women, I bet there's a lot that have never done something, as long or even an ultra race before.
Definitely. But it does also include a handful of very competitive women. So what Lostor have done effectively is attract pretty much the full spectrum of female athletes, which is really exciting from a dog watcher's perspective.
And like we were saying in episode 1, it's just going to be really interesting to see, how many women are actually in the top 10 overall, because it's been won, of course, by Fiona in 22 or 21? I can't remember. Before
19.
The pandemic, 19. Oh, yeah, we lost a good few years, didn't we, with that pandemic? That was inconvenient. But yeah, obviously Fiona won it overall, beat all the guys. And I don't see any reason why it couldn't happen again, especially when there's more competition, when there's more women pushing each other and trying to race. And I know women are just as competitive, if not more so than men sometimes. There's no reason that couldn't happen again. So that's going to be pretty exciting to watch, and we'll do some more coverage of that later in the year. So keep on listening and subscribe if you enjoy this thing and all of that. And yeah, we'll talk about it. It's going to be a talking point throughout the year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that for sure.
Last year's women's winner, Jana Kessenheimer's, signed up again for this year. And there was a release of a 12-minute video on Instagram yesterday by a man called Stefan Weiser, who is a director-producer of sports films. And it's an interview where there are three different people on the video that he's interviewing, talking about whether bikepacking needs a governing body, which I think is fascinating. And it's something that's been touched on a little bit at various points over the past few years. And it often gets brought up when you hear about something like a little drama on social media.
There's always a drama on social media. That's what it's for, isn't it? Just to blow things out of proportion and make a trivial thing life-changing.
And we're we're not going to comment on that topic at the moment, because each episode will be talking about a certain topic. Josh mentioned that later in this episode we'll be talking about volunteers at races, but hopefully by next episode we'll have a good argument to talk about governing bodies in backpacking.
And it's only just been released in the last less than 24 hours. So it's pretty fresh news, and I think we both need to watch it. And we'd encourage other people to watch it as well. And if you've got some thoughts or comments, and if you're watching on YouTube, put them in the comments section. Because it's going to be a hot debate, I think, and I think something we should touch on. So we'll just discuss that in more depth next episode. So moving on, there's which I know we're only one episode in, but we're going to blow our own trumpets a little bit. So as I said last time, it was quite quiet. We didn't have much news, so we did make up quite a lot of rumours, and it turns out that some of those were actually true. So. We speculated that the fourth race from Nelson Trees in the mountain race series, so that's Atlas Mountain Race, which we're going to cover, Hellenic Mountain Race and Silk Road Mountain Race. We knew there's one in Turkey, and there was a cryptic fourth mountain race post account on Instagram. However, when I went to post the one of the shorts I made of our last podcast and tagged in the fourth mountain race Instagram account, it actually said it was now the Taurus Mountain Race. So we managed to guess right. So
I think you're selling yourself short, Josh. I don't think that was a guess. I think Nelson took your lead. I actually think you're entitled to some royalties for that.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Maybe a free entry or something like that, but pat chance of that. But anyway, just goes to show that it's worth listening to our made-up news in case there is actually something factual in it. The other news, upcoming events later in the year, the Japanese Odyssey has been announced. So I did that. Was it last year? No, 2023. I went to Japan and did the Japanese Odyssey, which again is more of a kind of an Audax type event. There's not really a winner as such, but it's a fantastic way to cover basically north to south or south to north, depending which way they run, of Japan through a series of checkpoints, which are normally on massive mountains. So you get to see loads of rural Japan. It was a really amazing event. They've decided after that event to run it every other year. So 2025 is a Japanese Odyssey year. And it's starting on the 5th of October in Kagoshima. And there's no news on the route or anything like that, but check out their website if you're kind of interested in visiting Japan. It's a really good way to see the country and really experience the place. So yeah, I definitely would recommend that. And there's a few other routes or races and route announcements. So Beccy,
it's the time of year where information about this year's event starts to trickle out. And since the last episode, we've heard about the VIA race, which had its inaugural edition last year. It's a approximately 4,000 kilometre road/all-road route across Europe with a couple of checkpoints. And this year it starts again at the end of July, and it'll go from Italy to the Netherlands, which I think is really interesting because we're so used to these long road events going north to south or west to east, but to see people moving north through the continent will be quite interesting.
Yeah, they've got quite a cool sort of storyline as well to their events. It was basically set up to compete with or as an alternative to TCR. Well, that's probably a whole other episode to talk about the politics of bikepacking. But anyway, so it was set up, and I think they've got a cool kind of storyline anyway. So that the first edition, basically, the route was based on, it was Hannibal, wasn't it? His kind of march into Europe.
Yes.
And this one is based on another Roman general, Germanicus, I think it was. And he marched basically to what is now the Netherlands. So from southern Italy to the Netherlands. So yeah, the route is kind of roughly based on that. So it's a nice kind of theme. So if you don't want to do TCR or you can't get a place on TCR, but you want to do something at that time, or even if you just want to do it on its own for its own merits, then VIA is an alternative for a road ultra. So that's the routes are there. So I guess they've got a website. You can find more details.
Another event which has released a little bit more information is the Pyrenesia, we believe it's pronounced, which will happen at the end of September, which is good because it fills a slight gap in the calendar, I think. And it's another coast to coast across the Pyrenees from the organisers of Grand Guanche. I believe it's a road route, Josh?
No, I think it's a gravel bike route. Obviously, there will be quite a substantial amount of road. It was, I think, so I know Matteo, who runs the Grand Guanche. He was telling me about this a while back, but he didn't say it was necessarily going to be an event. but he was scouting it, and I think it was based on there's like a Trans-Pyrenees mountain bike route that's kind of been around for a very long time. And I think essentially what they've done is they've kind of taken out the more mountain bikey sections, and then sort of kept the gravel road sections, or gravel bike friendly sections. So it should be quite a good event, I think. So I think it starts. Does it start? Don't know where it starts. I should probably check. I mean, check out the website. So it's Pyrenesia, September 28th, and that's coast to coast across the Pyrenees on a gravel bike. I think it's predominantly in Spain on the Spanish side, but I might be wrong. You never know. Again, more semi-made up news.
More semi-made up news.
Yeah.
But that does move us nicely on to something that we do know more about, which is the race around Rwanda. And that starts this weekend. And I'll leave it to Josh to do a little bit of an overview of the route, given that you have ridden it.
I have, yeah. I've been there twice before now. And so Rwanda is basically, it's an East African country, landlocked, very mountainous. And it starts in the capital city, which is Kigali. And basically it starts around 1,400 meters altitude and goes up from there. So it's pretty cool. You go through the Akagera, close to the Akagera National Park. That's kind of, if you imagine you kind of, your African kind of wildlife documentary, it kind of looks like that. The plains, and they do have some wildlife there as well, but you don't see it when you're riding because it's in a protected park. And then you basically climb up into the mountains, and you go up to sort of 2,500 meters. That's where CP1 is at the National Cycling Centre there, and that's the volcanoes region, and it's pretty spectacular. It's basically the city, and where the checkpoint is overlooked by these massive volcanoes, and then it's a mix of road and an off-road. They go close to the border with Congo. We'll come on to that in a second, and then the next sort of section it's kind of quite humid, and they grow a lot of tea, so you end up riding through these tea plantations. Go up to almost, not quite, but almost 4,000 meters on a massive climb, and then you ride alongside Lake Kivu, which I think is like one of the deepest freshwater lakes in the world, or something, some kind of crazy fact like that. And you ride along the Congo Nile Trail for a little while, which is pretty bumpy and rough. You go through all these tiny little villages, and all the locals like chase after you, and the guys on bikes with massive bunches of bananas basically smash you on the descents, and the taxi guys destroy you on the climbs because they were used to riding at like 3,000 meters every single day. And then you basically end up going through the rainforest, which is pretty cool, and then loop back round back into the kind of the flatter lands and back into Kigali. So it's about 1,000 k, I think, 600 odd miles. Most the front runners tend to do it in one big hit with a very small sleep, or maybe no sleep if they can stay awake. So the main challenge is, certainly for someone coming from Europe, is the heat and the altitude and the combination of the both. But it's a pretty fantastic race to do.
Something that I've heard from a few Race Around Rwanda veterans is they were surprised at how densely populated the route, or certain parts of the route, are, and how far it is to find a spot to do a wild pee.
Yeah.
Because you have an audience.
There's people everywhere, and they're so enthusiastic. Like I said, there's kind of like the taxi guys. So basically, it's a relatively poor country, I guess. Certainly in the countryside, a lot of people still work the land for money, or other sort of forms of income. Instead of getting a taxi, they'll just get on the back of a bike. So a lot of the younger lads kind of ride taxi bikes, which are big, heavy steel frame bikes. And then as they kind of develop through the ranks, they might be on a moped, as they can afford to buy a moped, which is like the next step up for public transport. And then if they really make some money over the years, they might afford to buy a car or an actual sort of taxi. And that's kind of like a career path in Rwanda. But a lot of work on the land. They grow bananas, and it's super fertile because of the volcanic soil and the humidity. They can grow so much stuff there, so much food. So
you're
it's
never
really
short of any street food or roadside snacks.
Yeah, some street food you're probably best avoiding in the middle of an ultra race. I mean, it's a case of quite often on these kind of races, dry biscuits and dry bread when you're in the smaller villages. There's not necessarily refrigeration, so if you're seeing meat, then it's probably best avoided. But bananas are just fresh, and it's not unusual for these guys to have like 100 kilos of bananas on the back of the bike, absolutely smashing it down a hill, and their brakes are their feet. And they essentially they essentially have special shoes, and they kind of attach either blocks of wood or bits of car tires to the bottom of their shoes, and then just put their foot on the floor to brake. And yes, it's amazing.
Why are we
actually.
messing around with all these sophisticated hydraulic disc brakes, Josh?
I know.
We've missed the.
I know, and they'll be riding faster than you as well.
I can imagine. Sounds humbling.
Yeah, and they also ride up the hills as well. So you can imagine the locals are super, super strong. So you're guaranteed that if a like a gang of like taxi guys have ridden down the hill to the next village and then they got to ride back up for the next fair, they're gonna race you on this race, and they are gonna beat you. So it's pretty cool. It's I mean I've heard Rwanda described as Africa for beginners because it's pretty safe there. We won't get to the politics of it, but they listen to the police, and you're pretty safe as a tourist. And yeah, it's kind of everything works pretty well. There's phone reception. There's 4G literally everywhere. It's better reception than the UK.
I can imagine. I've also heard it referred to as the land of 1,000 hills, and judging by the elevation profile, that sounds about right.
Well, yeah, funny you should say that, because there is a reason it is called the land of 1,000 hills. And I think you probably ride over 250 of them in the race around Rwanda.
I was going to say, maybe to any riders who are listening, if you need to pass the time, just count the hills.
Yeah. Exactly. And a small hill there is like a mountain here.
I don't doubt it. But one of the notes about this year's race around Rwanda is that there has been a very last minute route change. Only yesterday, the organizer released a new route, which, as Josh mentioned earlier, the original route, which is the route they've used through all of the editions of Race Around Rwanda, or it has a similar heart to it, goes close to the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo. And there's been some conflict there over the past week and a bit at the city of Goma. So the organisers have done an exceptional job of releasing a new route, which really doesn't change. It hasn't changed the distance or the elevation by very much at all. Judging by Ride GPS's breakdown of the terrains, it hasn't changed that much either. So it looks like they found an excellent alternative. Although riders do go a lot closer to Kigali in the middle of the race, which might make it a bit of a, call it like a graveyard, a dock graveyard.
Yeah. It's a bit of a mental challenge, isn't it? But yeah, obviously, Democratic Republic of Congo, it's there's always been a lot of conflict on that border. I mean, we won't get into the history of Rwanda and all that, but it's worth researching kind of the politics and history. Obviously, Europeans colonialized Rwanda, along with most of Africa, and then obviously when they pulled out, it was chaotic, and every now and again there are clashes in that border area, and it's not necessarily governed by government. It's a lot of guerrilla kind of groups. So yeah, I think it's flared up in Goma, so best to avoid that area. So yeah, a little bit changed, but I mean, if you've not been there before, you wouldn't even realise. Although Goma is kind of nice, it's a cool little city, but it just better be safe than sorry. But yeah, politics, it affects everyone, and a bikepacking race is pretty small in the grand scheme of things, so
sure,
they can't really be complaining.
Josh noted a little earlier about how Rwanda is a relatively poor country, and certainly on the calendar of places where bikepacking races happen. So one of the things that the organisers ask for from riders is for them to bring some, I think, typically second-hand equipment to the local riders in Rwanda, because cycle tourists around the world will know this. You can cycle to a poorer country, but bike parts don't cost you any less, which makes the relative cost of those things extremely high for some of the locals. So a lot of people turn up with, I think, things that they deem that they will no longer need and that are perfect to pass on to people who live in a country where it's really hard and expensive to get hold of what we can pick up in the local bike shop.
Yeah, they just don't have like high-end performance bikes there, really. I think there's one bike shop in Kigali, which is kind of, it's got some good stuff, but mainly expats. There's quite a big expat community in Kigali. Obviously working for NGOs and things like that, and they tend to spend the money. But local riders, they're just unable to afford it. And being a landlocked country, it does add a lot of expense because traveling with goods across Africa, there's additional taxes and transport costs and probably bribes that need to be paid to get across certain borders. And it just makes it very expensive and inaccessible for a lot of these guys who are taxi guys, bike guys, or guides. And I've been there a couple of times, and I know quite a lot of the riders, the local Rwandan riders. And actually, a couple of them came over to Europe a few years back. I obviously did a bit of work for Hunt, and we managed to get a couple of the riders over to do the Tracker 360 event in Girona. And that was a big deal for them because they don't necessarily get the chance to do that and see what it's like outside of Rwanda. So it's also really important that riders do go to these countries and give them someone to race against and know what it's really like. Because if you race against the same people over and over again, you don't really know what you're kind of competing against. So yeah, it's a great event, and just participating in the event does subsidise a lot of really good local kind of riders and groups, and helps riders out. And donating stuff when you go to Rwanda, if you donate a jersey, like a standout jersey, like one of a kind that is kind of pretty unique, if you went back for the next 5 years, you'd see it every single time, guaranteed, because this stuff really does get used a lot. So yeah, good stuff that they're doing. And there's a pretty good start list as well.
I was going to say, while there are a few barriers to taking up cycling in Rwanda, it hasn't held many riders back. There are a couple of riders. Well, actually, last year, 3 of the top 5 were all East African riders, and a couple of them are back this year.
Yeah, it's a big event because obviously it's hard to travel outside of Africa if you're from an African country and you've got an African passport. From whatever country it is quite tricky to get into Europe. I know that from taking the Rwandans to Spain, to Girona. It took a lot of work and a lot of uncertainty, and then last minute you suddenly get a visa and then it's okay. And Team Omani is a big team in Eastern Africa. They're based out of Kenya, I-10, which is kind of very famous for where all the marathon runners live and train. And they have so much trouble getting riders, especially into the States. I think they actually sued the American government. Michael Degron, who runs it, and also is involved in the Migration Gravel Race. You might have heard of that big stage race. He works for the UN or something. So big. He's a lawyer. So he goes to all these big kind of big sort of criminal cases where dictators have been brought down from small kind of African countries type thing. So he knows his stuff, and he literally had to sue the American government to get his riders into Africa.
Wow.
So I don't know the ins and outs of it, not being a lawyer or anything like that, but it just shows that it is difficult. So yeah, it's a big deal when there's a race that you can get to easily. It's relatively cheap. If the riders are in Kenya, they can get to Rwanda easily, and likewise, there's a lot of swapping between races. And then it's a really big deal when big name riders come to their country, like you've done the Tour de France or been professional or are at the top of the game in ultras, because then they can test themselves. So super, super important. So the riders we're starting to see that they're getting better and better. So one of the riders from Team Omani, Kenneth Karaya, I've met Kenneth a few times, both in Rwanda and also at the Atlas Mountain Race. He did it in 2022. The first time I did it as a pair with Joffrey, and that was I've never seen someone so broken. Ken was he was absolutely ruined. He'd gone so deep in himself, and I think that whole experience just totally destroyed him. But he learned from it.
Didn't put him off bikepacking, because I was checking his results and he came second at Badlands last year. Yeah. Which is astonishing. Badlands has arguably the most competitive start list of any race.
Exactly. And I think he's even won race around Rwanda or been right up there a couple of years as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's going to be one to watch. He knows his stuff. And also the thing about, I've been to Rwanda to race, and it's a big hit on the senses. You've altitude, heat, new culture, new food, all these things. Every time an African rider comes to Europe or America to race, it's really expensive, it's stressful, it's hard work. And then they're in an alien land. They don't know what the food is. They don't know the temperature. They've not seen rain. Well, that's true. They haven't seen rain, but they've not seen cold, like European rain. It's kind of more humid, hot, rain from out in the Rwanda. It's kind of 20 degrees and raining, not 2 degrees and raining. So it makes the whole thing so much harder. So they can race at home on their own terms. Kenneth, he's a strong rider. Is a really, really nice guy as well. Got a lot of time for him. And I think he's a big favourite to win that. So it'll be interesting to see how they get on, especially with the experience over the last few years. And then a couple of the local riders who I get on with really well. So Innocent, you have to excuse me for the pronunciation of his surname, Niriba. So Innocent actually, he's now a bike guide. So a lot of these guys have been in the under-23 Rwandan national program. So cycling in Rwanda is a big deal. Everyone kind of relates to bikes there. There's taxi bikes, there's banana bikes. They carry milk from the farms to the dairy on bikes. Everything happens on bikes. So the sport has developed, and the Tour of Rwanda is a big deal. You get like thousands and thousands and thousands of people lining the road every single day to see the Tour of Rwanda. And if you win it as a Rwandan, you're just a national hero. And these guys are heroes anyway. And of course, the Road World Championships are in Rwanda, in Kigali in September, which is a big deal. And so they have a very good development program. And a lot of these young guys who are talented get on the program. And then once they're over 23, it kind of runs out and they've got nothing to do. They've given their whole life to be in these pros, and then kind of that's taken away from them. They're earning decent money for Rwanda, and then they've got nothing to do. And a couple of those guys, Innocent and Jean Rubera, they got picked up by a program called Rwanda Beyond, which is run by Simon, who actually, he runs the race around Rwanda. So a lot of your entry money actually goes to supporting these guys to get to races. And that's how I got involved in bringing them out to Europe a couple of years back. So yeah, I spent a lot of time with Innocent, really nice guy, super talented, super strong on the bike. And he's got a lot more races in his legs now in terms of experience. So again, he's going to be strong and one to watch. And Jean, I actually raced the Rwandan Epic, which is a mountain bike stage race out there. Again, last time I was there. So I did the stage race, and then I did the ultra the week after because it was all backlogged after the pandemic. So I managed to make a double header of it. And basically he destroyed me on every single climb. And then as soon as it went downhill on the technical stuff, because I'm more experienced on a mountain bike, I was able to catch him. But the learning curve was steep. Like he was learning so quickly, and by the end of it, it was really nice to ride with him and see that. So yeah, again, another strong rider, local rider, knows it like the back of his hand. He's a guide now. So if you want to go cycling in Rwanda and you want a guide, a local guide, speak great English, funny guys, really funny guys. There you go. They're the people to search out. So that's the locals that I know. Any other big names that you spotted on the start list, Beccy?
Doesn't get much bigger, to be honest. Lawrence Tendam and Ted King are both lining up. Ted King, did he start Tour Divide last year? That was his first bikepacking race.
Did he start it? I'm not sure if he did or not. But Lawrence Tendam was second or third, wasn't he, behind Ulrich and Justinus, but not too far back. And obviously these guys were World Tour. Lawrence Tendam, Ted King, also Thomas Dekker is going out. He's good friends with Lawrence Tendam. So that's 3 World Tour riders on the start list.
We also picked out not a World Tour rider, but a guy called...
a thoroughly nice chap.
Quite. A guy called Chris Ellison. He's a British guy from Yorkshire, and he would be... You could say he's the Tour Divide oracle for any British rider going to do the the Tour Divide. And I think the support he has given people... A friend of mine, Gail, who started the Tour Divide a couple of years ago, and she was saying what the support and information that Chris was so keen to share was... Trying not to get a bit emotional now, Josh. It was just made a really big impression on her.
He does a hell of a lot for the community. He's one of those unsung heroes that don't really get acknowledged. So yeah, Chris deserves a big shout out, and hopefully he has a great time in Rwanda. And he also runs or is involved in the Dales Divide. I think the route actually goes past his house or through his back garden, pretty much.
It does, and I'm going to embarrass him here because when I did the Dales Divide, within the first few hours I was a couple of 100 meters behind him and I caught him doing a wrong turn
off his own route.
And I thought, I'll bank that, Chris, because I'll bring that up at another point.
Sorry for embarrassing you, Chris, but anyway, yeah, Chris is there. So yeah, he just deserves a shout out for doing a lot for bikepacking, especially in the UK, and I'm sure he'll have a great time, and hopefully he'll push Lawrence Tendam and Ted King and Thomas Dekker. So it'll be really interesting to see how those guys get on, and see how they deal with kind of those kind of conditions. And more importantly, can the East Africans, can they take them on and challenge them? I'm pretty sure they can. And, just if someone like Kenneth can win Race Around Rwanda against those guys, it's a big deal. It really is a big deal for these guys who don't have the opportunities to, come to Europe and, race every weekend against the best in the world from a young age. They just don't get the chance. So that's why it's worth putting a lot of spotlight on races like the Race Around Rwanda, because it's doing a good thing. It's a nice holiday for the riders doing it, but it is actually doing good, and it's given opportunity, which is really important, I think.
Quite. The East African riders have always struck me as being very ambitious and hungry.
They are.
And I think they will delight in lining up against riders like Lawrence Tendam and Ted King and Chris Ellison.
Yes, yeah. The things that they don't want it easy. They want to push hard and they want to be the best, Quite often, I think for some riders, it's almost like a way out. Not just because I know certainly there's some riders where you can earn relatively good money if you're pretty good and you get to like the Rwanda national level and then even a pro team. even if it's a very low salary in Europe, that's a high salary in Rwanda. So there is, it's not like us where we're just, it's almost like you take a pay cut to try and chase your dreams, and if you screw it up, you're all right, you just go and get another job. It's like, it's actually a legitimate path, and it can make big differences to families out there. So yeah, it's cool to see, and we look forward to following that race, and I'm sure we'll discuss it next week or next month, and see how they got on. So yeah, Beccy, what's next on our very well planned list of things to talk about?
Well, elsewhere in Africa is as we've mentioned, the Atlas Mountain Race, and that starts on the 7th of February. That's 2 days after my birthday, just in case anyone was curious. And it is one of the most hotly anticipated races of the year. It's arguably the season opener. It's been going it started in 2020, but it missed a year during the pandemic. So this is the 4th edition. The route is largely unchanged since the inaugural event, with the first checkpoint being in Telluride Pass, and that's the highest point of the race, and it's a hefty hiker bike.
Yeah, maybe. It could be.
Well, for those not with the redshift components, it is.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things, and Nilsson's very clever at marketing his events, and he told everyone the first year it was a gravel race. It's not a gravel race. It's just horrendous if you ride on a gravel bike.
Yes.
And essentially, Telluride Pass, it's a mule track, I think is the best way to describe it. So essentially, it's kind of a footpath. So if you're kind of like semi-competent or fairly competent, proficient on a mountain bike and ridden technical trails, then it's not too bad. You might have to walk a couple of sections, but it's not too bad. But if you've just come from gravel riding or from road riding and you're on a gravel bike with skinny tyres, it's a hike, because it is really quite technical. And this year the race starts at, I think it's 6 p.m. Or 9 p.m. I can't remember. I always get mixed up. But it's starting. Essentially, it's going to be dark when you get there for the vast majority of the field. So you'll be going down the most technical part of the whole route from the highest point of the race, which is like 2,600 odd meters, 700 meters. As you can see, we've done a lot of research again. I've been up there twice. I still don't know how high it was. So yeah, you're going to hit that in the dark. But the checkpoint is in a small town called Telluride at the bottom. And normally the fastest riders normally get there around midnight, so about 6-7 hours into the race. And then the pack kind of, some riders sleep beforehand, but everyone else kind of trudges down the hill in the dark, not knowing where they are. And there has been snow up there as well. It'll be interesting to see. I hear that it's relatively cold in Morocco at the moment, so it could be, it's looking like 5 or 6 degrees overnight in Marrakesh.
In Marrakesh?
Yeah.
Jesus, that could put it in the negatives up on some of the route.
Yeah, it could do. Yeah.
So it starts in Marrakesh. We probably should have mentioned this earlier. Sorry, it starts in Marrakesh and finishes in Aswaria, which is out on the west coast. And it's a beautiful coastal tourist town, but it's hard earned for the riders.
It is, yeah. So after CP1, Telluride Pass, you head over basically the Atlas Mountains, which is kind of the bigger sort of ridge of mountains, and then you go into the anti-Atlas, which aren't quite as high, but they're a bit more remote, a bit more barren, a bit more kind of deserty. Sort of after the anti-Atlas, you've basically got the Sahara Desert. Resupply is not too bad, but it can be limited. Basically, it's the classic. You end up eating omelettes or dry biscuits, not much else, maybe sweets. Then you might get a tagine at a checkpoint. We're not talking like big bowls of pasta and petrol stations with endless kind of racks of fizzy drinks and sweets and sandwiches. It's very much, you're going to be skinny afterwards. That's guaranteed. In actual fact, I've actually consciously tried to be a bit fat for this race, just so I've got something to go at, because otherwise I get to the end of February and I'm just super skinny, and then last year I just fell apart as a result, I think. So yeah, so there's 3 checkpoints. Second checkpoint is in the town of Azarea. I think that's how you say it.
Just call it.
It's CP2 in a nice little auberge, and then CP3 in Tarafalt, and then there's you basically end up crossing back towards the Atlas and cross the Atlas again. So you cross the desert, or almost desert, a big sort of sandy area. And then you've got some absolutely killer climbs to finish. Not the biggest climbs in the whole race, but by the time you get there, it's like a series of 4 or 5, finishing on what is known as the Moroccan Stelvio. So it's a tarmac switchback climb, but it's just not where you need it. It's close enough to the finish that you're almost there, but far enough away that it's just annoying. I fell apart so badly last year. It was pretty horrendous how badly I fell apart. I think I lost 2 places in like the last less than 100k.
Josh,
and then I was so
you've been
ruined.
doing this for almost a decade.
Yeah, I was so ruined. I actually slept about a k from the finish. So yeah,
something that I always love doing with the Atlas Mountains. So for those who are looking at map progress, which is where the tracking happens, is changing the base maps and changing it to satellite, and it'll just give people a really good idea of quite how dry a lot of the route is, because the colour, and you can zoom out of the map obviously and see the rest of Africa, including Rwanda, which comes up like a green. I was looking green little mini rainforest, and then Morocco looks it's pretty brown on the map.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're basically in the Sahara Desert, not far off, so water is sparse. I think the longest section is 100k without resupply, which is not too bad. But I mean, I was really dehydrated at the end of it last year, like kind of so dehydrated that I was just puking up as soon as I drank stuff, which isn't ideal. Probably why the wheels fell off near the end. I'm kind of one of the faster people through that section usually. So for the back markers, it can be quite a big old stretch, and there's just nothing there. And then you get to a small village and you'll get some water, maybe some Coke, and then an omelette, which has got pretty much minimal calories. So it's just very attritional. It's beautiful. Morocco is beautiful, and the landscape, it's very deserty, but it changes all the time. Some beautiful colours. I mean, if you're into geology, then it's amazing. There's some pretty cool rocks. Not that I am, but I can appreciate that it could be pretty cool if you're into that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just really attritional, really beautiful, really remote, and the people are lovely as well, the local people. And yeah, I love it. It's my 3rd time going back, and there's a reason. So yeah, looking forward to that. The other challenge as well, of course, it is still February. And although it is sunny, its daylight hours are limited. So I think it's almost 11 hours of darkness, which does make it quite hard. That's one of the biggest challenges, riding the dark for such a long time. And some sections, you're just in the desert, or like deserty mountains in a big wide open kind of area full of rocks, and you just have no idea where you are. It's really
keeping
quite
your lights fully
disorientating.
charged as well.
Yeah, well,
The days.
I'm using a dynamo for that very reason.
Interesting, because not many people would use a dynamo on such a short race.
Yeah, but it's not so much the distance, it's more hours in daylight. And you're going to be, if you do it out for four nights, it's not going to be necessarily 40 hours, but that's almost like a good 30 hours riding in the darkness. And it's possible with battery lights, but to be honest, for me, it's just one less thing to think about and manage.
And not only is the race itself in such short daylight hours, but for those in the Northern Hemisphere, all the months leading up to the race training's been done in, well, even shorter daylight hours. So it's quite a challenge for some people to turn up race fit at the beginning of February. Yeah,
and I think you're also just being healthy. Straight out of Christmas, everyone's ill after Christmas. So if you can get to a race at the start of February without being ill, that's my biggest challenge right now, especially having a toddler at nursery. It's just a nightmare. So yeah, that's kind of that's the challenge of getting there. Firstly, get on the start line, not be ill, and then try not to get too dehydrated and try not to get too hungry.
Because you're really selling it, Josh.
That's
you're
great.
Really selling it.
Yeah, get a nice suntan for February at the end of it though. Virgin on sunburn. So yeah, so that starts. It's next week now as we record this. Next Friday at 6 p.m. I think we decided it was. I should probably read the handbook actually.
Otherwise, you're giving yourself a 3-hour time penalty from the start, Josh.
Oh yeah, probably. I mean, I literally got my bike yesterday, so I've not ridden that yet either. So yeah, so that's going to be that's the big one really, and there's some pretty big names on the start list. So do you want to run us through a couple of those then, Becky?
Yeah, so I've split the race favourites into Southern and Northern Hemisphere for the reasons that we've just outlined, because the Northern Hemisphere riders will be turning up relatively fit, but with no racing miles in them.
So you're basically giving us all a nice excuse before we even started.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But then the Southern Hemisphere riders will turn up having spent most of the summer training. There's two riders that I've picked out, Kevin Benkenstein and Dreykus Coetzee. They are two Namibian riders.
Kevin's from South Africa, I think.
Kevin's from South Africa. They are South African and Namibian riders, respectively.
Almost the same. But the link is there that Kevin actually won the Rhino Run. No, he was second in the Rhino Run, which finished in Windhoek in Namibia. after crossing in South Africa. And that was a good solid, nearly, is it 8-9 days, wasn't it? So through the desert, basically. That's a lot more remote and not as mountainous, but I was there. Well, I didn't finish because I couldn't hack it, but but yeah, he could. And some really, really long remote sections. So he's someone that can really deal with these remote conditions and dry conditions.
Interestingly, Dreikers Coetzee, he was leading the Atlas Mountain Race last year.
He was in a battle with Justinus. I think they kind of battled back and forth, and then Justinus got ahead, got a bit cocky, started slowing down a bit.
He surprised me.
Yeah, then Dreikers basically totally destroyed himself, got within like 10k of Justinus, but then got so dehydrated he had to scratch with about 20k to go.
I couldn't believe that. To see a Namibian scratching because of dehydration was really surprising.
But if you dig deep without water, I mean, it's easy to do. I mean, we're all human, we're all the same. It's just if your system runs, if you've got a leak in your radiator in your car on a hot day, your engine's going to get hot and stop. And the human body's not too much difference. And I think he was just so hungry. I've been talking to him a little bit, and he basically said to me, "Yeah, I just wanted to win. I wasn't happy to settle for second place."
Have you been psyching him out, Josh, telling him that actually drinking water is not the solution to dehydration? You should just keep going without water.
He's been asking advice, so I've just been giving him the bad advice, of course. But he turned up. This was his first ultra last year. He's done some of the. They've got some. It's called Lamunga, I think, and a couple of others in South Africa and Namibia, which are probably more kind of akin to Badlands, so kind of long gravel races in like you do in one hit. So he'd not done something as long, and I think he turned up with like a big canvas bivy bag, which he then realised wouldn't fit in his bags. So he didn't really take any sleeping kit. He didn't have any enough warm enough wet layers. So he was running right on the edge.
Which has been done. Yeah. Another rider, Sofiane's one of the favourites from the Northern Hemisphere. And his ride in 2020 was pretty remarkable given how little he slept. I think he really pushed the boundaries of sleep deprivation that year.
Well, that set precedents. I think I think he did it on like 2 hours sleep or something, a couple of power naps.
Over 4 days.
Yeah.
Which was obscene.
Essentially, that was his big breakthrough in the world of ultra racing. And it was amazing timing because the Atlas Mountain Race was literally the last thing that happened before the pandemic.
I was thinking, because I was there, I was meant to race, but I got an injury. So I went anyway in one of the media cars. When we were flying back from Marrakesh to Bristol, we all got given forms saying, "Have you been to China within the past month?" And I thought, why the hell am I being asked this?
No, but I've got sore throat.
Running a fever and I've lost my sense of taste.
Yeah, well, there was a few people there that, like, I won't say names, but they definitely said they had COVID afterwards. But yeah, I mean, that was Sofiane's big breakthrough, and he essentially won that race by not sleeping. And then there was nothing happened for years, like almost 2 years after. But there was like a documentary that came out about the Atlas Mountain Race, and there was loads of images, and it basically got sent into every single magazine across the world. It was a big hit on YouTube, and so everyone knew about the Atlas Mountain Race, which really accelerated the growth of it, and Sofiane and his profile. And then everyone watched that film and like, oh well, if I'm going to win one of these races, then I just don't sleep, which can work. But I think people are becoming smarter now. For example, Justinus realised that the more you sleep, the stronger you can ride, or the faster you can ride, and you can make up the deficit of lost sleep by sleeping. And I think people are kind of learning that now. So yeah, which is kind of a nice segue onto our next favourite, Seb Brewer, who absolutely loves to sleep. He's a good sleeper. He's also an exceptional cyclist. He won the European Cross Country Mountain Bike Championships probably about 5 years ago now, I think. And so he's like world-class elite, and he's been dabbling with these ultra races. I've raced against him in the Silk Road Mountain Race. He's so much faster than I am, but he was sleeping like 6, 7, 8 hours every single night, and I just catch him every morning. So by the end of it, we'd have a nice chat each morning. Then he'd disappear off, and then he'd sleep earlier. I'd catch up again, and we'd have another chat the next morning. And I think the final morning we had breakfast together, and we rode like an hour or so together, had breakfast together, and then he put 2 hours into me the rest of the day. But he's strong, and he could most definitely be up there for the win if he doesn't sleep much, which is the if. So it'd be interesting to see, really. It'd be interesting to see how Seb gets on. But it just shows that, like, the level and the strength and depth of these races. We've been saying it, well, I won't say we've been saying it for years because we've only done one episode. But if we'd been going for years, we would have been probably saying this over and over and over. the strength in depth of these races is getting deeper and deeper, and there's some really good, really, really fast guys now. Another one, Alex McCormack, he, of course, set the record on the Highland Trail 550 last year.
Took a couple of hours out of Angus Young's record from the year before, which we all thought was going to be left untouched for another few years, but didn't last 12 months.
And he's young as well, isn't he? He's, 24, something like that? 25 maybe?
Just a baby.
Just a baby, yeah. Well,
just a baby.
10 years younger than me, jeez. And but again, he's a super fast guy. I mean, he took a lot of risks on the Highland Trail, I think, in terms of not much kit and things like that. So he's definitely got the legs to win it. It's the experience. I don't think he's raced in the desert before. Atlas has its own unique set of issues to deal with that we kind of touched on before, with like the heat and the lack of food and things like that. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how Alex gets on.
We've picked a couple of other names out of the start list who
quite a
Josh
few,
has diplomatically said he thinks will sit around top 10 to top 15. A rider who we've already mentioned in the podcast, Alaskan, is Miron Golfman.
Did we mention him?
Have we mentioned him? Was that in the...
we were talking about him, but...
in the pre-episode catch-up.
Yeah. But Miron is... Well, he's, like Becky said, he's from Alaska. Lived in the US. He's won the Iditarod 1000 twice, which is the basically the number one winter snow ultra. So we'll talk a bit more about that next episode, hopefully. He's also won the Colorado Trail Race, which is one of the Triple Crown races. And he did a bit of the Drickus actually at Highland Trail last year, didn't he? Because he was right up there in second and third place, battling with... Who was he battling with? Oh, Thomas Beret. And he managed to basically turn yellow. He pushed so hard that his kidneys started packing up or something. And he was in a bad way. I saw him a few days after and he had a bit of a yellow tinge still. So
God.
I think,
hopefully he has a nice brown tanned tinge at this race.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he's dealt with those issues, because Atlas Mountain Race in Morocco you're going to get dehydrated. So hopefully he can deal with that. But we'll see. But like Becky said, there's the strength in depth of this field is massive. So I think we've got our sort of top contenders for the podium, and then there's any one of sort of 10 or so riders that could get, fill out the top 10 into the top 15. So Jeroen Tuis, I think his surname is. Of course, partner with Sherry, and they've been top 10 but they've been the fastest pair at the Transcontinental Race a couple of times. They've done a lot of pairs racing. Not so much off-road racing and solo racing, but I've ridden with those guys briefly on TCR, and they're strong. Jeroen's really strong. So it'd be really interesting to see how it translates over into Atlas and kind of an off-road ultra. So definitely one to watch. I've also picked out Matthew Page. He's probably not a very well-known name, but basically we used to race each other years ago when I was doing 24-hour mountain bike races. He always used to beat me, which is quite annoying, to be honest. But he was like national 24-hour mountain bike champion. He's done like the Crocodile Trophy. He's won Iron Bike which is some crazy stage race. He's been like podiums on the World 24-hour Championships. So again, this is his first ultra. So I don't necessarily... Well, he's told me he doesn't necessarily have that higher ambitions, but no, I just know Matt, so I won't be surprised.
Yeah, it's a long way to go with no ambitions.
Yeah, exactly. Although he does live in South Wales or central mid Wales, so it is pretty much the polar opposite in conditions. So we'll see how he deals with that.
There are parts of mid Wales they call the Green Desert, but it's not dry. Definitely not dry.
No. Who else have we got in our other ones to watch then, Becky?
Well, you put in the name Omar Martinello.
Yeah. He's a name, I'm not too familiar with him, but he was kind of there or thereabouts on the Silk Road last year. So again, he's another one that's kind of knows how to deal with these kind of remote places. So it's a name worth keeping an eye on. I think he's one of these riders that will probably be in the top 10 early on. I think a lot of people are going to go out hard. There's going to be a lot of people close, which means hard racing, which means it's easy to overcook it, which means there's going to be a lot of scratches later on. That's the pattern I've seen over the last few years. It's kind of what I'm hoping for too.
And then wise old Josh
purely
just glide through to the podium.
Yeah, purely in the hope I can get a decent result. However, last year I was that guy, so we'll see how we go. But yeah, Omar's worth worth looking out for. I've also picked up Alex Kowalski over from the US. He's a single speeder, and I think we need to give a shout out to the single speeders. He was had a great battle on the Tour Divide last year. I can't remember exactly which position he came in, but there's three of them that are really battling in the single speed. So he's coming over to Morocco. I'm looking forward to meeting him. Seems like a fun guy. So yeah, worth keeping an eye on just for the good times on his Instagram, if anything.
The next rider that I picked out was Anatole Naimi. He's a Belgian rider whose best result would be second at Transpyrenees last year, but he's done other races. He did Atlas a few years ago.
Didn't he come third at the Transcontinental race?
Oh, Josh. Trying to get us cancelled.
Yeah, well, a bit controversy is good for ratings, isn't it?
He was the first rider across the line, but he was relegated for riding too long with another rider.
Yeah, there was some politics a couple of years back. So he basically finished third and then was disqualified upon arrival, which it didn't go down too well in all circles, which was unfortunate.
One of the dramas and potentially one of the reasons that some people think there should be a governing body in the sport.
Exactly.
But that's next episode's topic.
That's the next episode. But next on our list, well, it's not actually next on our list, but I'm going to make him next on our list, is Andrew Phillips, who disqualified Anatole in the TCR in, I think it was 2023.
He was just relegated out of classification. He wasn't technically disqualified. I know Lost love the definitions, so I thought I should just fact check.
Okay,
well, carry on fanning the flames.
I like our rumours, so he disqualified him. So we've got a personal battle here, Andrew versus Anatole. But Andrew is actually, so he's one of the directors of the TCR and the Lost Dot races. So he's actually, I think he was top 15 last time. He's one of course, the 2 Volcano sprints, so he can win these things. So I would put him in this group. And also,
it's always interesting to see a race director turn up to a race as well, because he's very much now known as a race director and less so as a racer. But he has had a top 10 finish at TCR, so he's no slow coach.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's just pile on the pressure.
Yeah, and it's been, well, should we start some rumours? He's been training in northern Morocco as well, so he's going to be acclimatised to the conditions and the food and things like that. Was he training, or do you think he was scouting out a 4th race for Lost Dot?
I think he was scouting out a 4th race, considering he put photos on his Instagram with Hannah, who's one of the other coordinators / directors at Lost Dot. And I'm sure in one of the photos I spotted David Eyre, who is the 3rd coordinator / director. So why were all 3 of them on holiday in northern Morocco on bikes?
I don't know. So Andrew he's going head to head with Anatole and Nelson for a race in Morocco. So well, you know we like our rumours, so you can consider that a rumour. We don't have an actual rumours section on this episode, so we're just spreading them out throughout the episode because we haven't got actual things to talk about this month. So let's move swiftly on before we get cancelled again. Who else have we got, Becky, for our kind of chase pack?
Our chase pack, we picked up Tim de Witte. We should probably have an apology at the beginning of every episode for all the European names that we butcher so badly. We are so classically British in that way. And he was 3rd at TCR last year. And he's slowly been moving up the rankings in various races over the past few years.
I think he's been podium on TCR twice, or certainly top 5 in TCR twice now.
Yes, I think he's got 3rd place 2 times in a row.
I think so. So he's obviously really strong. Again, there's a lot of riders now that have started on the road ultras and are now giving off-road a go. So I think he's obviously fast enough. He's obviously got the engine for it. The question is, can he bring that road fitness across to off-road ultras and the challenges that have, where there's not a petrol station or a gas station every 20-30k? Can he cope with carrying the food and plan ahead? I'm sure he can. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. And people like him and Jerome, they're kind of wild cards, I think. So it'd be interesting to see. And then finish our chase pack with a couple of riders that were top 10 last year. So Rob Roy Cameron, he was 9th, was he? Or 10th? He was a place behind me.
I can't remember. I was just thinking how good his name is.
Rob
it
Roy
sounds
Cameron.
Like a kind of a good, strong cowboy name.
Yeah. Well, I think it's South African. I've met him a few times. He's a really nice chap. Really strong on a bike. And yeah, top 10 last year, coming back again. So, that experience, that power, you can't rule him out. So he's in our chase pack. And last but very much not least is certainly our male chase pack, Thomas Beret, he was actually third last year. So he's made some great leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. I think the first time I did Atlas, I beat him. And he was like, I think he's on the edge of the top 10. And then last year he just came out, totally smashed it and got third. And he was second at Highland Trail 550. And I know he works extremely hard and he's very on it with his attention to details. So I think he'll do well. It's proven he can do well. So we've got to watch him as well. Maybe we should have put him in the favourites, but there was quite a gap to the front last year, and he was kind of ahead of that chasing pack. So I think out of our chasing pack here, Thomas is probably the one to watch, and an outside bet for the podium again. We've also got a couple of Moroccan riders, so cap number 224 and 225. So Teb Assalan and Tafik at Mous, and they've both taken part before. I think they've both finished at least once.
Yes.
Which is cool to see. Again, when like we touched on this with the Rwandans, when there is an event, even the Tisha Women 100, if you put it out there and it's there and it's available and thing to do, it brings people in. So there's a couple of local Moroccans who've just taken it on because it's on their doorstep. So that's really cool to see. And on the theme of women racing, Becky, do you want to run us through well, it's another stacked field. The women's field.
Is. Yeah, it is. And it's really exciting. There are 279 riders on the map progress tracking, and 30 of them are women, including any of the women in the pairs. And I thought that's pretty good. Over 10%.
Considering there's no real push to like the sort of T-Shart or Holland Trail to kind of really get that 50-50 kind of split or really, really encourage women. It's kind of, I guess
Nelson really doesn't do much, or certainly compared to Lost Art over the past few months.
No,
but the women on the list include, and I think the favourite woman would be Megan Hakkinen, who we mentioned earlier in the episode is doing the full Nelson.
She should have probably been in our chase pack as well.
Yes.
Given her credentials and history.
Another woman is Sherry Cardona. She is Herion's life partner, but not race partner in this time because they're racing separately. And they've both primarily been on the road, but they've done a bit of off-road, including Badlands. So we'll see.
I know Sherry's worked really, really hard on her off-road skills as well. I think she was almost traumatised by the off-road parkour, which were pretty rough on a road bike a couple of years back. She's got some videos on YouTube, and I think it's fair to say that it was quite the traumatic experience for her. But to be fair to her, she's just really worked on it. I think she's done a couple of off-road ultras and done quite a lot of off-road riding now. And so she's definitely strong and fast. So again, it's going to be really interesting to see how that transfers across over to racing an off-road ultra. We should also mention Megan. We didn't really mention that she won Tour Divide last year. So it's kind of a big deal that she's there racing. And of course doing the full Nelson as well. So she'll be in Hellenic and Silk Road, which is cool to see. And then there's two other women that we've picked out as kind of ones to watch. So that's Masha Varling. I think that's how you say it. Sorry, Masha, if I've totally mispronounced your name. And Mariah Mollenhauer. So Masha she raced last year. I don't think it went that smoothly for her. But she's won a couple of I think there's the one in Portugal. Was it the Goats? I can't remember.
Okay.
She's done quite a bit. She did Hellenic last year and had a pretty solid result.
She was top 10.
Yeah.
Top 10 overall at Hellenic.
Yeah. When I say solid, I mean pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, it's she's super, super strong. And then Marie Mollenhauer, she was, again, top 10 overall. I say top 10 overall, fourth at the Justinas' race. What's it called again?
Bright Midnight.
Bright Midnight.
I know this one.
Yeah. So the Bright Midnight, obviously run by Justinas Lebeca, and she was in a battle. There's like three. That's her and a couple of guys battling for that fourth place right at the end, and she just beat them all. She's also finished TCR a couple of years back. That was her first event. Just a nice, easy one to start. So yeah, again, I think Mariah. I'm not sure if it's Marie or Mariah. I'll have to ask her. Sorry for mispronouncing everyone's names as per usual. But yeah, Marie has done more road and gravel, and this will be the first more kind of mountain bikey or rougher race. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that translates, and that fitness and obviously talent translates into Atlas. So
in
yeah,
the pairs
exciting.
Category, I would say we have a clear favourite in the pairs category of
Rich and Shona on their tandem.
You took the words out of my mouth.
So we should give a big shout out to Rich and Shona, who are racing Atlas Mountain Race on their tandem. I think they've also done the Silk Road Mountain Race on their tandem.
Yes.
And they were quite influential in the route and helping Nelson in early days.
They raced the first edition of Atlas Mountain on separate bikes that time. But the actual race favourites I was talking about were Robin Jean-Perle and Lucas Strittmatter. Robin is last year's Atlas Mountain Race winner, as well as winning the Transcontinental last year, having finished outside, just within the top 10 in the previous 2 editions of the Transcontinental. And last episode, we were hoping his pair would be Nino Schurter, but it's not. It's a man called Lucas Strittmatter, who I don't believe has done a bikepacking race. And we had a Google and found some results on some mountain biking events, but he's very much a wild card paired with the race favourite.
Yeah, I think I heard that they wanted to win it overall and be the fastest out of everyone.
That would be brilliant. The only time I've ever seen that is across Andes in 2019. Otherwise, I can't think of a time a pair has won a race.
I think it's a tall ask, but you never know. You never know. It'd be cool to see. Robin certainly is world class. He's probably one of the top guys out there at the moment. So I do feel sorry for Lucas. He's going to get smashed. Probably. Or maybe not. You never know. Maybe the other way around. So those guys are going to be right up there. And then Liam and Jesse Yates. Liam's raced a couple of times. Jesse's been like top 10 in Badlands and things. So it'd be interesting to see how those guys get on. They've got some pretty good genes. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they race, like 2 brothers racing together. It's going to go one way or the other, isn't it? So yeah, we'll see how those guys go.
This episode's relevant topic that we've picked out is about volunteers at races. They are, for most races, a fundamental part, and races really couldn't exist without them. But they have there's a variety of roles that the volunteers can have. And until fairly recently, I think a lot of us have thought of volunteers as being physical volunteers, where they are at control points or checkpoints, start and finish places, or they're the mechanics doing the bike checks before the race. And they'll be stamping brevet cards, noting arrival times, and then maybe doing some kind of welfare checks and passing on information to organisers. Alongside this, there have been dot watchers, which this is dot watching in quite an official sense, not in a spectator sport kind
With
of
a spreadsheet involved, basically.
Which I think you know a lot more about, Josh, because your mum has been Queen Dot Watcher at Lost Dot.
Yeah. Well, I don't actually know too much about it, to be honest, because I've not been sort of directly involved. But I've got basically, I know that she spends a lot of time during TCR, or has done in past TCRs. It's basically like a full-time manager's job. So there's various people out there, out there at home with maybe 5 to 10 riders, I think, allocated to them. So if you work out the field of TCR, what's 250, 300 riders now? That's quite a lot of people. And then they basically make sure the riders haven't gone on any banned roads, or they're not in pairs or drafting too closely, which is how these, we took the mick out of Anatole and Andrew earlier. But that's the kind of system which means that these things get picked up, and probably also why in that particular instance it took quite a while for it to be acted upon, because there is like a system, and the bigger the system, the slower quite often they work. So yeah, my mum is well, I guess Queen Dot Watcher, and oversees it all. So all the problems come to her and she deals with it. It's just like a management job, really, I guess. It's quite intense.
While the dot watchers are there to do some policing of the race, they're also there for the rider's safety as well, I believe, and to check they're not suddenly doing 100 kilometres an hour in a car directly to a hospital.
Or up a massive climb, which has been known to happen. And I think the TCR or the Lost Dot watchers are, they're probably people are more aware of them. But even organisers like Nelson, he does have his kind of key people who are a bit more under the radar. Maybe it's not quite as a formative system, but they're just keeping an eye on everyone, making sure everyone's okay. Which in more remote places like potentially Morocco, or more so Kyrgyzstan, where there's not necessarily the communications, the phone signal, it is quite important that someone is overseeing, because if you're in a control car and you have no phone signal, you can't check the tracker. And therefore you can't you can't fully understand what's going on. So it's good to have people overseeing, and all these people are volunteers, and there's not like a big pro sport. It's still very much grassroots on the whole, although it is starting to change. Maybe that's a chat for another day. Well, it's definitely a chat for another day. But yeah, a lot of people do volunteer and for the love of it. And we talked about Chris Ellison, who's going out to the race around Rwanda. He does stuff like that, and runs his own races as well. He's not, got any sponsors or anything for his races. He just does it for the pure love of it. And there's still quite a lot of people that do that as well. Alan Goldsmith being another example of such a person. He runs Highland Trail 550.
Yeah, they are real labours of love for those people. Last year was actually the first time that I ever did any volunteering for a race, and it was a race that Josh was riding in, the Accursed race, Lostot's first no-fly off-road route in the Balkans. And because of their no-fly rule for the riders, they then, to further reduce carbon footprint of the race, didn't have people travelling out to any control points, or they had one or two people maybe.
It was mainly the actual sort of race staff, like the directors and like race photographers, whoever who were kind of following the race along, like a skeletal staff, I guess.
But instead of having fully staffed control points like they do at Transcontinental and Transpyrenees, they had those Ring doorbells. And they installed one at each of the control points, and riders would ring one. And I think there were 4 or 5 of us on a schedule, and you'd have to keep your eye open for whenever a call came through, or you had a pretty good idea of when someone would arrive looking at the tracking. And you would check them in, basically, and mark an arrival time on a website, and just have a little conversation over a doorbell. It's not that easy to have a conversation.
No, I didn't think it was great, if I'm honest. It was when you kind of meet a volunteer at a checkpoint, they're kind of in it. They're in the race, and I guess it's quite hard when you're on the outside. You know what's going on and you're tracking and stuff, but you don't really know what's going on, and you can't read the room as such when someone comes in. For example, me, really miserable, grumpy because I just fallen off in a big puddle and ripped my raincoat and in a bad mood. So. Yeah, and it's from my point of view, it'd be quite nice just to see a smiling face, and someone just tell you it's all right, and then you've just got a doorbell, but there's not even a screen on it. I think that would make a difference, if it was like a Skype call or something. But
oh yeah, you couldn't even see us, could you?
No, it's very one way. It was very one way. I understand it. It was pretty. It was kind of a fairly smart idea, but if it was 2-way, I think it would be much better. But then I guess it is like a test of true ultra, You don't get that human contact, which really can make a difference. And I guess that's another whole massive debate we can have about supported and checkpoint people and support crews and seeing control cars and film crews and all of that, which has probably been had far too many times for the internet to need another debate about it. But it's it does make a difference. And for me, Ring doorbells weren't great, but they're essential. You do need these people to look after races, and people do make the races run. And it's not even just sort of the tracking and the dot watching side of things. You need people to, for example, drive the cars. So my dad, for example, has been to Atlas a couple of times with me. Not with me, just to be clear, wasn't supporting me. But he's driven one of the control cars. His hobby is basically rallying trucks. So given the chance to go and razz a hire car around Morocco, he's quite keen. So normally he ends up driving Niels Langer, the photographer, and Nelson, the race organizer, around. Basically, with no cost to himself if he hits a massive rock and breaks the car. So he gets a nice holiday out of it. But the point is, he's willing to do that and happy to do that. And it does take people, and they're not necessarily paid to do so. A lot of races do cover expenses, certainly on the ground, not always travel. But yeah, if you're into actually racing yourself, it's hard to go away for another 2 weeks or something to volunteer on a race as well. So it's a different set of people that these races and these events do rely on.
It can often be a member of family of someone who is racing, or especially in the case of Lost Dots, someone who is racing curious. Because traditionally at Transcontinental, and I don't know if it happens, I don't know if it's the case anymore, that if you volunteered one year, you were almost guaranteed an entry the next year.
I'm pretty sure. I think most races have some kind of concession like that.
Mm.
And also, once you know the organisers and, maybe if you're inexperienced, but they've met you in person and they know you're not going to be an absolute liability on their race and you have some understanding, it is easier then as an organiser to let you in. And also, maybe it is a system to get some volunteers. But I mean, Lost Dot, they encourage people to ride out to the checkpoints. You can start a week or so in advance, get that experience, get the experience of the race, and then everyone's a winner because you have that experience as a rider or a new rider, and then they get the people they need to make the race run. And if you're riding there, then have to pay your train tickets, so they're happy too.
So there are a couple of the pros to both the volunteers and the races about having these volunteer dot watchers and control point staff, but there are cons. I think when you pay someone to do something, you can set out a slightly stricter guideline on what they're allowed to do. And we talked about Anatole being relegated, as well as Seb Sarks in TCR a few editions ago. And there was some...
23, I think it was, wasn't it?
23. There was some confusion about what one of the volunteers at one of the control points has said to them about whether they'd spent too much time together or how much more they could spend time together. And a different person in that situation might have said something different, which could have changed or potentially changed the outcome. And I think these volunteers, and we see it at Dot Watcher, all our commentary is done by volunteers, and it's all done very differently because we encourage people to write in their own style. But it means that the outcome is done very subjectively. It's not standardized per se. And I think to a lot of riders that can be quite frustrating, that how they get treated or what happens at a control point might vary, depending on who's staffing the checkpoint that day. But the volunteers are just real people. And
they're probably taking holidays off work to go and volunteer at the race. So
quite.
And
I would argue that
forget.
Races aren't held in a petri dish. They're not held in some sterile environment. They're just held in real life. So having different outcomes depending on the people who are around you is just real life.
Yeah, I guess that is some kind of argument that we touched on it earlier. The governing body kind of argument. Maybe that is a factor involved in that with some standardization.
Mm-hmm.
But then it'll be going down the British cycling route or the UCI route. If you need to have you need to go on a course to be able to, like for road racing in the UK. One of the demise of road racing in the UK, and sorry to bang on about road racing again on Bikepacking Podcast like we always do, but it's the scene is dead because in order to have marshals, that used to be that club members came and just waved the flag and the traffic would slow down. But then they introduced you had to go on a paid course. You had to be qualified and certified, and obviously people don't want to give up 20 weekends a year out of their own time unpaid to go and stand waving a flag at traffic. It's not much different. So you can put too many rules in there which can then impact the sport and the organisation, I guess.
Definitely.
So yeah, it's an important point to touch on because we're talking about these races and the riders and the cool places that they go to and the organisers, but actually behind all of that it is volunteers. So yeah, I think we should say give a big shout out to anyone that's ever volunteered at a race and a big thank you because it's super, super important. And I think a lot of them probably don't get taken for granted a little bit and they don't get enough appreciation. So good on you, everyone who's done that before.
Absolutely. Well, that marks the end of this episode of the podcast. So we could quickly cover what we're hoping to talk about in next episode.
You're making it sound like we've made some kind of plan, but we've looked at the calendar and seen what events there are. So
think quick, Josh. Just say something. Say anything.
I'm going to be at the Atlas Mountain race, so I'm sure I can get some good gossip from there. If not, we'll just make up some rumours. But yeah, we should have the Atlas will be the first sort of big event of the calendar. That would have finished by that point. So the next episode will be coming out probably end of February, start of March. And then we've got kind of the next sort of load of races. So the Iditarod trail race in Alaska, that will probably be ongoing as we as we record. So we'll have a look at that. Maybe talk a bit more about that event, because it's one of the longest standing events, I think, but probably quite unknown. It doesn't get that much in the way of coverage because it's actually quite cold and quite hard to cover an event on the ground there. So very few people know much about it. So we'll try and maybe we'll have a guest. Do you think we can find a guest who's done that?
I think we can, as long as they haven't frozen to death on the Iditarod. We can find. Well,
if not, someone. We'll have to use AI or something. But we can we can try and add someone else in, and then we'll carry on looking forward to the rest of the season, because before we know it, we're still in winter now. But by the next episode, spring will be very much on the way, and with it all the bulk of stuff, and then we're going to get really busy because it's going to be races non-stop. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. So if you have, then consider giving us a big thumbs up on YouTube, or giving us a review on your podcast platform that you're listening to. And any
5
feedback...
stars only, Josh.
Oh yeah, only 5 stars. Yeah.
Anything less than 5 stars, you just write that in that diary and send it to Santa.
And we're open to feedback. So write in the comments, or the reviews, or send us a message on ultrascape.podcast on Instagram. That's a good way to get hold of us. And yeah, we'll look forward to hearing from you, and see you again. Well, you'll hear us again next month. So
Thanks, Josh. Good luck at Atlas next week.
Yeah, I better go and get my bike ready now, because it's less than a week and I've not done that yet.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. See you next time. Cheers.